In a small town nestled deep in the woods, there was a house that everyone knew to stay away from. It was said that anyone who entered the house would never come back out. But one day, a group of teenagers decided to explore the house, just for fun. As they entered the house, they could feel an eerie presence. The walls were covered in cobwebs, and the air was musty and damp. Suddenly, they heard a creaking sound coming from upstairs. Curiosity getting the best of them, they slowly made their way up a staircase. As they approached a room at the end of the hallway, they heard whispers coming from inside. They pushed the door open and saw an old woman sitting in a rocking chair. She turned to face them, revealing a face that looked like it had been rotting for years. The teenagers screamed and tried to run, but the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The old woman cackled as she revealed her true form, a witch who had been luring unsuspecting victims into her lair for centuries. Just when the teenagers thought they were done for, the witch suddenly froze in place. Her skin turned to stone, and her eyes became lifeless. Confused, the teenagers looked around the room and saw a small girl standing in the corner, holding a wand. The girl explained that she had been trapped by the witch for years and had finally managed to escape. She had been practicing magic ever since, waiting for someone to come along and help her defeat the witch once and for all. Together, the teenagers and the girl used their combined powers to break the witch's spell and destroy her once and for all. As they walked out of the house, they realized that the small girl was actually a powerful witch in training, who had orchestrated the entire event to test her skills and defeat the evil witch that had been terrorizing the town for centuries. The teenagers couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. They had gone on from being terrified victims to heroes, and would never forget the lessons they learned and the challenges they overcame. It was a dark and stormy night, and a group of friends decided to take a shortcut through the woods to get to their cabin. As they walked, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. But they brushed it off as just their imagination. As they reached the cabin, they realized that the power was out and they had no cell phone signal. They lit candles and started telling each other scary stories to pass the time. Suddenly, they heard a loud banging on the door. They froze in fear, but then realized it was just the wind. But then, they heard footsteps outside, and they knew someone or something was out there. They huddled together, trying to stay quiet, but then they heard a voice whispering their names. They were terrified and didn't know what to do. Then, the door burst open and a figure stood in the doorway. They couldn't make out who it was in the darkness, but they could feel its cold breath on their faces. The figure moved closer, and they realized it was a ghost. They screamed and tried to run, but they were trapped. Just as they thought it was all over, the ghost spoke. "I am not here to harm you," it said. "I am here to warn you. Leave this cabin and never come back, or suffer the same fate as the family who used to live here." The group quickly left the cabin, and as they walked away, they saw a flash of light in the windows. They turned back to see the cabin burst into flames. The group was shocked and grateful to the ghost for saving their lives. They never returned to the cabin, but the memory of that night stayed with them forever. It was a dark and stormy night, and Jane was driving home from a late-night shift at the hospital. She had taken a shortcut through the woods to avoid a congested main road, but she soon regretted her decision. As she drove deeper into the woods, the rain intensified, and the wind howled like a pack of wolves. Suddenly, a car hit something in the road, and she heard a loud thud. She got out of the car and found a dead deer lying on the ground, its eyes staring blankly up at the sky. Jane was horrified but knew she had to keep going. She got back in the car and continued driving, but something didn't feel right. The trees seemed to be closing in on her, and the rain sounded like whispers in her ear. As she drove on, the road became narrower, and the trees became denser. Suddenly, she saw a figure in the middle of the road, and she slammed on the brakes. It was a woman, dressed in a white gown, with long black hair covering her face. Jane was frozen with fear. She tried to reverse, but her car wouldn't budge. The woman started to walk towards her, slowly but surely. Jane tried to call for help, but her phone had no signal. The woman reached the car and knocked on the window. Jane was too scared to move. The woman's hair moved to reveal a pale face, with eyes as black as coal. Jane screamed, but no sound came out. Suddenly, the woman smiled, revealing a set of sharp teeth. "I've been waiting for you," she said, before disappearing into the woods. Jane was petrified, but eventually, she managed to start her car and drive away as fast as she could. She got home safely, but she couldn't shake off the feeling that something was still following her. As she entered her house, she saw a figure sitting on her couch. It was the woman from the woods. Jane screamed, but the woman spoke softly. "Don't be afraid," she said. "I'm here to help you." Jane was confused but listened to what the woman had to say. She revealed that she was a spirit, who had died in the woods many years ago. She had been waiting for someone to help her cross over to the other side. Jane realized that she was the only one who could help the woman. She agreed to help, and the woman disappeared. The next day, Jane went back to the woods and found the woman's body. She performed a ritual and helped the woman's spirit cross over. From that day on, Jane never took shortcuts through the woods again. She knew that the spirits of the dead were always watching, waiting for someone to help them move on to the next world. It was the dead of night, and Emily was walking home from a friend's house. She had had a few drinks, but she wasn't drunk. As she walked down the dark, empty street, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was being watched. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around, but there was no one there. She picked up her pace and tried to ignore the feeling of dread that was creeping up on her. As she turned the corner, she saw a figure standing in front of her. It was a tall, dark figure, with glowing red eyes. Emily froze in terror. She tried to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The figure started to move towards her, slowly but surely. Emily tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure got closer and closer, until it was right in front of her. Suddenly, the figure spoke. "Don't be afraid," it said. "I'm here to protect you." Emily was confused. She had never heard of a protective figure with glowing red eyes, but she didn't have time to ask questions. The figure led her down a dark alleyway and into a hidden basement. The basement was dimly lit, but Emily could see that there were several other people there. They all looked scared and confused, just like her. The figure turned to Emily and spoke again. "Listen carefully," it said. "You are all in danger. There is a group of people who want to harm you. They will stop at nothing to get what they want. But I won't let them. I will protect you, no matter what." Emily didn't know what to think. She had never been in a situation like this before. But she trusted the figure, and she knew that she had to do what it said. The figure handed her a weapon, and Emily realized that she was not alone. There were others there who were ready to fight for their lives. She took a deep breath and prepared for what was to come. Suddenly, the basement door burst open, and a group of men entered. They were armed and dangerous, and Emily knew that they meant business. But she was ready. She fought with all her might, and she didn't give up until the last man was defeated. As the fight ended, the figure stepped forward. "You have done well," it said. "You have proved that you are strong and brave. I will always be here to protect you." Emily was relieved, but she had one question. "Who are you?" she asked. The figure smiled. "I am your guardian angel," it said. "And I will always be with you, no matter what." It was a warm summer night, and Lily was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep. She had just finished reading a scary novel, and her mind was racing with thoughts of ghosts and monsters. As she closed her eyes, she heard a faint tapping sound coming from the window. She tried to ignore it, but it continued. She got out of bed and walked over to the window. As she peered outside, she saw a figure standing in the shadows. Lily was scared, but she recognized the figure. It was her best friend, Sarah. Lily quickly opened the window, and Sarah climbed inside. "Lily, you have to help me," Sarah said. "I'm being followed." Lily was confused. "What do you mean you're being followed?" she asked. Sarah's face was pale with fear. "I don't know who they are," she said. "But they've been following me for days. I can't take it anymore." Lily knew that she had to help her friend. She got dressed and grabbed a flashlight. Together, they snuck out of the house and into the darkness. As they walked through the quiet streets, Lily couldn't shake off the feeling that they were being watched. They turned a corner, and Lily saw a figure in the distance. It was a man, dressed in black, with a hood covering his face. Lily tried to keep her cool, but her heart was racing. She knew that they had to get away, but it was too late. The man had seen them, and he started to run towards them. Lily and Sarah ran as fast as they could. They turned another corner and found themselves at a dead end. The man was closing in on them, and Lily knew that they had no escape. Suddenly, Sarah grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her towards a hidden door in the wall. Lily had never seen the door before, but Sarah seemed to know where it led. They opened the door and ran down a flight of stairs. They found themselves in an old basement. It was dark and musty, and Lily could barely see anything. But she could hear footsteps behind them, and she knew that they had to keep moving. They found another door and opened it. They stepped into a room that was filled with light. There were people there, and they looked up when Lily and Sarah entered. Lily recognized some of them. They were her friends and family. Lily was confused. "What's going on?" she asked. Sarah turned to her with a smile. "Welcome to the safe house," she said. "We've been waiting for you." Lily realized that the safe house was a secret organization that helped people who were in danger. She had always heard rumors about it, but she never believed that it was real. Sarah explained that they had been following her for weeks, and they had finally decided that she was worthy of joining their cause. Lily was stunned, but she knew that she had found her true purpose in life. From that day on, Lily worked with the safe house to help others who were in danger. She never forgot a night when Sarah had saved her life, and she was grateful for the opportunity to make a difference in the world. Emily and her friends were on a camping trip in the mountains. They had pitched their tents by a beautiful lake and were enjoying the serene scenery. As night fell, they gathered around the campfire and roasted marshmallows. Emily felt relaxed and happy, surrounded by her closest friends. As they were getting ready to go to bed, they heard strange noises in the woods. Emily's friend, Emma, suggested that it might be a bear, but Emily wasn't convinced. She had a feeling that there was something more sinister out there. Despite her unease, Emily went to bed and fell asleep. But she was awakened by the sound of footsteps outside her tent. She tried to stay calm and listened carefully, hoping that it was just one of her friends going to the bathroom. But the footsteps continued, and they were getting closer. Emily's heart was pounding in her chest, and she knew that she had to do something. She grabbed her flashlight and cautiously unzipped the tent. What she saw made her scream in terror. There was a figure standing outside her tent, dressed in a black cloak. with a pale face and empty eyes. Emily's friends woke up and rushed outside their tents, but the figure was already gone. They spent the rest of the night huddled together, too afraid to go back to sleep. In the morning, they packed up their things and left the campsite as quickly as possible. As they were driving down the mountain, they saw a strange building in the distance. It was an old mansion, and it looked abandoned. But something about it made Emily feel drawn to it. She convinced her friends to stop the car and investigate. They walked towards the mansion and found the front door unlocked. As they stepped inside, they were greeted by a strange sight. The mansion was filled with people, all dressed in black cloaks, with pale faces and empty eyes. Emily's friends panicked and ran out of the mansion, but Emily was transfixed. She recognized the people as the same figures that had haunted her dreams for years. They had always seemed so real, but she had never been able to explain them. But now, as she looked around the mansion, she realized the truth. The figures weren't ghosts or monsters, but people who had been brainwashed by a cult. They had been living in the mansion, cut off from the rest of the world, and practicing strange rituals. Emily's world had been turned upside down. She realized that the things she had feared the most were actually real, but in a way that she had never imagined. She knew that she had to be careful, but she couldn't shake off the feeling that the cult was still out there, watching her every move. It was a dark and stormy night, and Lily was alone in her apartment. She had just finished a long day at work and was looking forward to a quiet night in. But as the thunder rumbled outside, she started to feel uneasy. Lily tried to ignore her fears and settled down on the couch with a book. But as she read, she kept feeling like she was being watched. She looked around her room, but there was no one there. Suddenly, the power went out, plunging the apartment into darkness. Lily tried to stay calm and fumbled around for a flashlight. She heard a noise from the kitchen and went to investigate. As she entered the kitchen, Lily saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was a man, with a hood over his head and a knife in his hand. Lily froze, too terrified to move. The man took a step towards her, and Lily braced herself for the worst. But then, the man removed his hood, revealing a familiar face. It was her neighbor, Jack. Jack explained that he had been out in the storm and his power had gone out too. He had come to borrow some candles and had entered the apartment without knocking. Lily felt relieved and embarrassed for her overreaction. But as Jack left, Lily couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. She went to her bedroom and saw that her jewelry box had been opened. She had been robbed, and Jack was the only one who could have done it. Lily called the police, and they arrested Jack. He had been a serial burglar, breaking into his neighbors' homes and stealing their valuables. Lily had narrowly escaped becoming his next victim. As Lily lay in bed that night, she realized how close she had come to danger. She had let her guard down with someone she thought she could trust, and it had almost cost her everything. She knew that she would never be able to forget that night, and the fear that had consumed her. Samantha had always loved hiking, so when her friends suggested a weekend camping trip in the wilderness, she jumped at the chance. They packed their gear and headed into the forest, eager for adventure. As they set up camp, they noticed that there were no other hikers in the area. It was strange, but they assumed that it was because they had chosen a remote location. They spent the day exploring the woods and taking in the beauty of nature. That night, as they were sitting around the campfire, they heard strange noises coming from the woods. Samantha's friend, Rachel, suggested that it might be animals, but Samantha felt like something was off. She had a feeling that they weren't alone. As they settled into their tents, Samantha couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. She felt like she was being watched. She tried to calm herself down and drifted off to sleep. But in the middle of the night, Samantha was awoken by a loud noise. She sat up and listened, trying to figure out what it was. It sounded like footsteps, and they were getting closer. Samantha grabbed her flashlight and unzipped the tent. As she shone the light outside, she saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was a man, dressed in ragged clothes, with wild eyes and a knife in his hand. Samantha screamed and tried to run, but the man was too fast. He caught up to her and grabbed her by the arm. Samantha struggled and screamed, but he dragged her deeper into the woods. As they went deeper into the woods, Samantha's fear turned into confusion. The man wasn't trying to hurt her. In fact, he seemed to be leading her somewhere. Eventually, they arrived at a clearing, where Samantha saw something that made her blood run cold. There were dozens of people in the clearing, all dressed in ragged clothes, with wild eyes and knives in their hands. They were chanting something in a language that Samantha didn't recognize. But then, something even more shocking happened. One of the people in the group turned around and looked straight at Samantha. It was her long-lost brother, who had disappeared years ago and was presumed dead. Samantha was stunned. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. But then, she realized that her brother had been taken in by a cult. They had brainwashed him and turned him into a follower. Samantha managed to escape from the cult and alert the authorities. Her brother was eventually rescued and deprogrammed. But the experience left Samantha with a deep sense of trauma. She had gone on a camping trip with her friends and had returned with a shattered sense of reality. Emma had always been fascinated by ghosts and the supernatural. She often spent her weekends exploring abandoned buildings and looking for signs of paranormal activity. One day, she heard about a haunted house on the outskirts of town, and she couldn't resist the temptation to investigate. She packed her equipment and drove to the house. It was old and decrepit, with broken windows and overgrown grass. As she stepped inside, she felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that she was in the presence of something otherworldly. Emma explored the house, taking pictures and recording EVP sessions. But as the night wore on, she started to feel like she wasn't alone. She heard whispers and footsteps, and saw shadows moving in the corner of her eye. She felt like the spirits in the house were trying to communicate with her. As she was walking down the hallway, she heard a loud noise from upstairs. She cautiously climbed the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. She entered one of the bedrooms and saw a figure standing in the corner. It was a woman, dressed in white, with long black hair. Emma felt like she had seen her before, but she couldn't remember where. The woman beckoned her to come closer, and Emma took a step towards her. But then, the woman disappeared, and Emma heard a loud thud from behind her. She turned around and saw that the door had slammed shut, trapping her in the room. She tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Emma was stuck in the room, alone in the dark. She felt like the spirits in the house were closing in on her, and she knew that she was in grave danger. But then, something unexpected happened. The door opened, and Emma saw a man standing in the doorway. He was holding a flashlight, and his face was twisted in fear. The man explained that he was the owner of the house, and he had been trying to scare away trespassers. He had dressed up as a ghost to frighten Emma, but he had never intended to hurt her. Emma felt relieved but also embarrassed. She had let her fascination with the supernatural cloud her judgment, and she had put herself in danger. She knew that she needed to be more careful in the future, and that ghosts weren't always what they seemed. Mia had always been fascinated by dreams. She was a vivid dreamer and often had strange and surreal dreams that left her feeling disoriented and unsettled. But lately, she had been having recurring dreams about a man she didn't seem to know. In the dreams, the man would appear to her as a ghostly figure, always just out of reach. He would speak to her in hushed tones, telling her that he was a real person who had somehow become trapped in the dream realm. He begged her to help him escape and return to reality. At first, Mia thought it was just a product of her overactive imagination. But the dreams continued, night after night, and she started to feel like there was something more to them. One night, the man in her dreams spoke to her more urgently than ever before. He told her that time was running out, and that she was his only hope. He gave her a set of instructions that she needed to follow to rescue him from the dream realm. Mia was skeptical, but something in the man's voice convinced her to try. She followed his instructions carefully, and soon found herself in a strange and otherworldly place that she had never seen before. It was a place of shifting shapes and colors, where the laws of physics didn't seem to apply. She searched the dream realm, following the man's instructions, until she finally found him. He was trapped in a bubble of shifting colors, his body flickering like a candle flame. Mia approached the bubble and reached out to touch it. As soon as she did, she felt a shock run through her body, and she was pulled into the bubble with the man. For a moment, they floated in the bubble together, surrounded by the shifting colors and shapes of the dream realm. But then, the colors started to fade, and Mia felt herself being pulled back to reality. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on her bed, with the man beside her. He was real, just as he had said he was, and he looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and relief. He explained to Mia that he had been trapped in the dream realm for years, unable to escape. He had tried to reach out to other people, but nobody had been able to hear him, except for Mia. Mia couldn't believe what had happened. She had rescued a man from the dream realm, something that she had never even thought was possible. But as she looked at the man beside her, she felt a creeping sense of unease. There was something about him that she couldn't quite place. His face seemed familiar, but she couldn't remember where she had seen it before. And then, she realized what it was. The man in her dream was her long-lost uncle, who had disappeared without a trace when she was a child. She had never known what had happened to him, but now she had found him, trapped in the dream realm. Mia felt a wave of sadness wash over her. She had rescued her uncle, but it was too late. He had been trapped in the dream realm for too long, and he had lost himself to the shifting colors and shapes of the dream world. Mia knew that she would never forget her uncle's face, and the eerie feeling that came with it. She had rescued him, but in doing so, she had uncovered a secret that had been buried for years. And she knew that she would never look at dreams in the same way again.